You've likely heard of the Constitution, but what does it say exactly?
7 years ago.
No.
When in the course of human events.
Closer, but no.
We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
Yes, that's it. On September 17, 1787, delegates from the Constitutional Convention signed the newly written U.S. Constitution, with the proviso that it would not come into effect until ratified by 9 of the 13 states, which happened 9 months later when New Hampshire became the 9th and last necessary state to ratify the Constitution, elevating it to the highest law of the land. Woohoo! But the road to drafting and enacting the U.S. Constitution was not easy. Quite the opposite. It proved long and arduous, and began only when an initial version failed to unite the fledgling states into a one nation. Democratic governments were practically non-existent in the 18th century, and the founders did not have much of a blueprint to work with when forming the new government. Fearing the repeat of tyranny from a single ruler, cough cough King George III, cough cough.
Ooh, you suck!
They erred on the side of caution and opted for greater states' rights rather than a centralized power in the Articles of Confederation of 1781, the nation's first constitution. But within a handful of years it became painfully apparent that the Articles of Confederation cut the legs out from under the federal government, and the states were too self-involved to keep the young country from collapsing like a house of cards. The Articles of Confederation gave Congress the power to create laws and call for capital from the states, but it couldn't enforce anything, manage trade, or even print currency. Meanwhile, the states continued to quarrel over expanding territory, pensions for revolutionary soldiers, and the role of taxation. You know, that pesky thing they had just fought a war over. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, now very concerned about the stability and future of the nation, convinced Congress to organize a grand convention. State delegates would be invited to revise the Articles of Confederation together in Philadelphia. In May 1787, 30-plus sweaty and angry men shuttered themselves in the sweltering state house hammering out the new law of the land. After months of intense debate, the Constitutional Convention ultimately scrapped the Articles of Confederation and emerged with a brand new Constitution of the United States, which is still in effect today. Ta-da! Bursting with novel governmental doctrines and practices, the Constitution was designed with three main purposes in mind. Create a national government consisting of three separate, but equal branches with an intricate and explicit system of checks and balances between these branches. Divide power between the states and the federal government, and protect the individual and personal liberties of American citizens. The Founding Fathers were not just concerned about their time, but centuries to come. They needed a living document that could be flexible enough to fit the needs of an evolving nation. The amendment process ensures the Constitution can be changed with enough support from the people and state ratification. And change it has. But the foundation of the Constitution has remained the same. Despite being 235 years old,
Happy birthday!
This revered document remains relevant in a world completely different from the one in which it was written. In fact, it has inspired many countries forming their own governments over the centuries, including nations in Europe, Latin America, East Asia, and Africa. The Constitution influences everyday life in the United States in both major and more subtle ways. Some of the strongest impacts include presidential term limits, judicial review, and trial by jury. We're also familiar with more popular aspects that have become almost uniquely American. Freedom of speech, right to bear arms, and the opportunity to vote. But the Constitution also has influence on us in ways we may not even realize. Personal freedoms like choosing how to educate your children, the ability to drink alcohol, if you're of age, attending church, or not, being able to gather in a group or participate in a protest, saying or writing what you like in any number of channels, thanks internet, and feeling safe in your own home all stem from constitutional principles. Even things we may not be so psyched about, like income tax, come from the Constitution. At 4,400 words, the Constitution is surprisingly short given the magnitude of its significance. Its reach has become so interwoven in the American psyche that it is an inseparable part of our national identity. The Constitution remains relevant today because it restricts government from obtaining too much power, provides our country with essential guidelines, and ensures rights and freedoms to its citizens. The past of America is bound in the Constitution. The future of America can be, but that depends entirely on its citizens. The founders knew the document they had painstakingly created was flawed. Consequently, they relied on future generations to learn from their mistakes and regularly adapt it to mirror changing times. The United States has, in essence, grown into a great empire. But history has shown us time and again that the demise of great empires stems from institutions being unable to address basic social problems.
Oops.
Ignorance, apathy, and a general lack of civic engagement open the door to constitutional illiteracy.
Yikes.
Like any entity, the Constitution is always one generation from extinction. Our confidence in the system relies on a faith that this document can fulfill the measure of its creation, and continue to empower generations of Americans to come. But this requires effort on our part. We must provide continuing education and inspiration to allow this living document to live. James would be proud.